Hey guys, so today our lesson is going to build off of last class. Last class we were working on writing equations of lines. So if we think back through those steps, we needed to find the slope, we needed to find the y-intercept, and then we could write our equation for y equals mx plus b. And so we're going to walk through that same process today, but our process for finding slope is going to be a little different because today we're going to be writing the equations of a line that is parallel to another line, or writing the equation of a line that is perpendicular to another line. So first of all, we have two equations that are graphed, and they are parallel lines. And if we look at the slopes in the equations, one equation is y equals 1/2 minus 2/5 x, or 2x over 5. That's the blue line. If we look at the orange line, y equals 29/10 minus 2x over 5. Okay, so if we're thinking about our slope, remember slope is the coefficient of x. For both of these equations, it's negative 2 over 5, negative 2/5. Okay, and so if we look at this equation, which kind of makes sense, right? If two lines are never going to intersect, they would need the same steepness, right? And slope describes steepness, so that makes sense with this. I can take these lines and I can move them all around. What I want you guys to see is that no matter where I move it, the numbers in front of x are staying the same. Okay? So if the lines are going to be parallel, they have to have the same slope. Okay, so here y equals 7x over 6 plus 53/12. The slope is 7/6, and the orange line, y equals 7x over 6 minus 31/12, so their slope is 7/6 for both of these equations. So if they're going to be parallel, they have to have exactly the same slope. They have to have exactly the same steepness so that they would never intersect. Okay, so we're going to use that piece when we're writing equations of parallel lines. When we're writing equations for perpendicular lines, I want us to first look for the blue line. The slope is 7/6. Okay, that's the coefficient of x. For the green line, if we look for the coefficient of x, the slope is negative 6/7. So think about what you notice about those two slopes, 7/6 and negative 6/7. And let's see if when we move these lines around, you notice anything about those slopes. Okay, so I'm going to move them around. Notice as I move them, they're staying perpendicular, so these are perpendicular lines. So for the blue line, if I look at the coefficient of x, I see negative 4/7. If I look at the green, I see 7/4. For this one, for the blue line, my slope, the coefficient of x, since it's in slope-intercept form, the coefficient of x is 6/13. So my slope is 6/13 for the blue line, and my slope for the green line is negative 13/6. Have you noticed anything about the slopes? For perpendicular lines, the slopes are negative reciprocals. Negative just means they have different signs, which makes sense because if the slope is positive, the line's going up. If the slope is negative, the line's going down. So we would need one of our slopes to be positive and one of our slopes to be negative, unless we're talking about vertical and horizontal lines, right? But one slope, they're going to have different signs. So when that negative part of negative reciprocal just means the opposite sign. And then reciprocal, back to fraction land, right? So instead of 6/13, that reciprocal would be 13/6, but we don't just want the reciprocal, we want the negative reciprocal, so that's where we get the negative 13/6 from. So for perpendicular lines, their slopes have to be negative reciprocals, and that is the second idea that we're going to bring into writing equations today. And if they're parallel lines, their slope have to be the same, and for perpendicular lines, their slope, the two slopes have to be negative reciprocals, right? So we flip it, and we have to change the sign also. If it were positive, it becomes negative, negative becomes positive. And that is really the only new thing for today. And we're going to use those two concepts to help us find the slope. But as soon as we find the slope, the rest of the problem is just like last class. So let's look at some examples. So parallel lines have the same slope. And example 1 says to write the equation of the line parallel to y equals 3/2 x minus 5 that passes through 6, -4. So parallel lines, they have the same slope. We need to identify the slope of this equation that we're given. And the slope of the equation that we're given is 3/2. So then the parallel slope, those two tiny little parallel pieces, that's the symbol for parallel. So the parallel slope has to be the same, so it has to be 3/2. So then when we go to work the rest of the problem, we're given this point, 6, -4, and we need to use the parallel slope 3/2. And at that point, we're right back to y equals mx plus b. We want to choose the y from the point, from that ordered pair, -4 equals m. We want the parallel slope, because that's our job, is to write the equation of the parallel line. So that would be 3/2. The x value from the point is 6, and then plus b. And so then, -4 equals, if we multiply 3/2 times 6, we get 9 plus b. And if we're solving for b, we're going to subtract 9 from both sides, and we get -13 equals b. So we have the slope that we need, we have the y-intercept that we need, so then our equation would be y equals 3/2 x. Remember, this is the y-intercept's a -13, so minus 13, and that is our final answer. Okay? If you think you understand, you can try and pause the video and work example 2 by yourself, and then if not, here we go. Okay, so this time my slope in this equation is -4. I need the slope of the line that's parallel to that. Parallel lines have the same slope, so the slope that I need is -4. We have this ordered pair, 6, 4. This time, notice the 4 has a different sign. So y equals mx plus b. We're going to plug in the y. So 4 equals, my slope is -4 times the x value, which is 6, plus b. So 4 equals -24 plus b. To solve for b, we're going to add 24 to both sides, and we get 28 is equal to b. Final answer for our y-intercept. And then last step is to take that parallel slope and the y-intercept that we found and write the equation. Y equals -4x plus 28, since it's a positive 28. Okay, that's all there is for parallel lines. So then what happens for perpendicular lines? For perpendicular lines, the slopes, remember, are negative reciprocals. Sometimes you'll hear it opposite reciprocals. Remember, the negative part just means to change the sign, which is why opposite reciprocals also make sense. And for the reciprocals, we want to invert that fraction or flip the fraction. Okay, so the first thing is we need to find slope. Remember, step 1 is to find the slope. And if I look in this original equation, for example 3, my slope is -2/3. I don't want that slope. I want the slope of the perpendicular line, so I need the negative reciprocal. Since this slope is negative, my perpendicular slope, so that little upside down T is the symbol for perpendicular. So my perpendicular slope has to be the opposite sign, so my slope's going to have to be positive. And if we flip the fraction 2/3, we get 3/2. So it's going to be a positive 3/2. We flipped it and changed the sign. And at that point, the rest of the problem is the same. We have an x, we have a y, and we have our slope. So y equals mx plus b. My y is 7 equals my m for that perpendicular line is a positive 3/2 times my x value, that's -6, and then plus b, and we're solving for b. So we need to multiply 3/2 times -6, and that would give me negative 9 plus b, add 9 to both sides, and we get 16 equals b. At that point, we're taking that perpendicular slope and that y-intercept that we just found, and our final answer, y equals 3/2 x plus 16. That's our final answer. So if you think you understand how to do 3, pause the video, try number 4 yourself. Okay, on example 4, we have y equals 4x plus 3, and we need a line that's going to be perpendicular to that also passes through the point 8, negative 3. So first step is to find the slope that we need, and remember we're trying to find the slope of the perpendicular line. So really we're looking for the negative reciprocal. Now this slope is 4. It's negative reciprocal. Well, since this is a positive 4, the negative reciprocal, we need a different sign. We have to change the sign. So if the original slope is positive, our perpendicular slope is negative. And 4 is really 4 over 1. So if we flip that, the reciprocal, if we invert that, we get 1/4. So my perpendicular slope is negative 1/4. So I'm going to plug in my x, my y, and that slope. Y equals mx plus b. So y is negative 3 equals m is negative 1/4 times x, which is 8, plus b. So negative 3 equals negative 1/4 times 8 is negative 2 plus b. To solve for b, we're going to add 2 to both sides, and we get negative 1 is equal to b. So we found our slope, we found our y-intercept. Last step is to write that equation, y equals negative 1/4 x minus 1 here, since my slope is a negative 1. And that's it. Thanks, guys.